All right, everybody in their seats now? All right, the clerk, would you please call the roll? Thank you very much.
Berkson, Carter, Cowart, Esri,
Here.
Harper, Harrison, here, Hartke, Jay, Kibler,
Here.
Maxwell, McGuire, Michaels, Mitchell, Quisenberry, Rosales,
Here.
Schrader,
Here.
Schwartz, Weibel, Petrie, and
Here.
Alex.
And just a reminder
Thank you.
to everyone, be sure you use your microphones.
For the record, you didn't call my name, but I'm here too.
Yes, you are officially here now, right? Welcome again, Mr. Shore. There is a quorum present. Thank you very much, clerk. I'm open for a motion for the approval of the agenda and the addendum, please. Oh, sorry, I skipped down. My glasses. Approval of the minutes, please. Thank you, Mr. Esri. Mr. Maxwell is seconding. Mr. Mitchell. Okay, guys, stop. All right. Any discussion or corrections on the minutes, please? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay. Thank you very much. Moving forward now, a motion to approve the agenda and the addendum.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Kibler. Mr. Rosales, thank you for the second. Any corrections on the agenda? Yes, Mr. Alex.
Without objection, I'd like to move item F5 under Finance, which is the authorization for loan from General Corporate Fund from the Public Safety Sales Tax Fund, up right after item A1 under Finance, which is the Treasurer's Report.
Thank you, Mr. Alex. Any other corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor of the corrected agenda, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. All right, thank you very much. We're moving toward public participation, and for those who have not been recently joining us, you'll notice we have a new feature. We have stop talking. A new feature for everybody. We have a timer that you will see up on the screen, and we still have the rule of 5 minutes and the total of a whole hour for public participation. I understand Mr. Jones would like to be first because he has a meeting to attend. So, Mr. Jones, please step forward. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Alan Jones, Champaign County Sheriff's Office. I'm the Chief Deputy. It's good to see you. I do live in Rantoul, if you want to know where I live. First off, the thing I wanted to talk to you tonight was about the reentry. The Sheriff's Office has participated in the program you funded. I have served as a member of the council for every meeting that I've been able to attend. And I want to recognize Celeste Blodgett, who is the chairman or the director of this group. She's here tonight sitting next to the sheriff. She's done a wonderful job with this and pulling the group together and moving forward. So my communication to you tonight on that regard is I encourage you to give this another year. We need to see more data. We need to continue to build the things. There's an exciting piece that's taking place in the peer mentorship program that's being put together with Marlon Mitchell and that group. One of the largest stumbling blocks that we have has to do with housing, and we're just now really kind of tearing off into that. Just a real brief side note, I don't know about where the parts of the report came from that are in your packet, but some of the numbers kind of look funny, so we'll have to deal with that. It didn't come from Celeste, she said, so we'll work on that. Second thing that I want to talk to you about has to do with the things that are happening in the community in regards to, use the term whatever you want. A term I don't like, drop-in center, drop-off center. Term I do like, community resource center. Term I do like, adult assessment center, something along those lines. As many of you know, the sheriff and I have for many times, and probably him more so than us, have made a point to tell you there's not enough capacity in this community to handle the needs of our people, homeless, addicted, whatever it may be, mental health in particular. And unfortunately, because those needs don't apply, they fall to law enforcement, and they expect us to step up and provide that solution. And we'll do our best because that's our responsibility and challenge. In this community, at the sheriff's office and the other police agencies, we follow that CIT model, the crisis intervention training model. We have a large number of our officers that are trained and deputies, and we'll continue to do so. There's another training coming up later this year. But unfortunately, without those resources and some of the things that take place, you have some that won't accept it. You have some that aren't welcome in some places. You have some that refuse to participate in it. And ultimately, we don't have the ability to make them do anything. Now, keep in mind, we have a significant amount of resources built in with community elements, the Champaign County Mental Health Board, Prairie Center, all of these programs that we have put together after they go to jail. How to take care of them when released. Reentry, you need to keep doing it after they get released. What we don't have is something in place for the law enforcement officer, for our citizens, that's on the front side, that's diversion or prevention. And these are the programs that we have to work for. Sheriff Walsh and I have met with Peter Tracy and the Mental Health Board. I've attended the Mental Health Board meetings. I've met with community elements and the leaders, Sheila Ferguson and the directors there, Bruce Swardini from Prairie Elements. I've talked with many of you individually and as a group together. There's a lot of movement into a resource center, and it's going in different directions. Lots of great ideas, but what's missing is leaders like you stepping in and saying, you know what, we need to fold these all together and get something moving forward. Now, I don't have the solution, and I'll be a great cheerleader. I'll go anywhere you want, but it's not the sheriff's office responsibility to run this. It's not my responsibility to put it together. So I'm asking you to join with me and us as we try to take this and lay it down into some positive direction to give the police officers that alternative. And again, keep in mind, don't fool yourself. There are people who are going to refuse services. There are people who are going to be told that they can't go places. There are people who are going to be down in situations and circumstances where they're not going to accept what's offered to them. There has to be a jail. There has to be a jail with the capabilities and capacity to handle the needs in the various classification situations in the best interests of the people we serve. And that's what we've been talking to you about from the sheriff's office. The facilities we have to be capable of handling those that we're entrusted to care for and those that we're required to care for. And we want to do it in the best situation, the best case and way we can. So my point is, do we need a consultant to put these groups together? Does one of you or a group of you or your subcommittee need to get these people to join them? The Mental Health Board, Community Elements, Prairie Center, whoever else is willing to talk about this. Shortly, I'm taking off and going over to the Art Theater to go to the screening there with that overcriminalization. We've seen the video. I want to go and support my friend Sheila Ferguson and have the conversation and continue this discussion. Again, I'll cheerlead all day. I'll join, I'll meet, we'll talk. No ideas I'm going to turn away, but it's not going to be the sheriff's office that's going to be able to take care of this. All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. And Ms. Baja, if you get corrected figures that you think it'd be important for us to have, would you please see to it that the board gets them?
The big thing I want to say is I don't want that to reflect or you to think that that reflects on Celeste, okay? She's very detail-oriented. I want to say that up front. She does a wonderful job. And I will follow up with her and maybe Astrid or Jim, who also sit on the council, McGuire, who sit on the reentry council with us. Maybe one of you can help get a report that gives some of those numbers and gives a real good reflection of the work that they're doing there.
Thank you again. Next, two people want to present together. It doesn't mean they're going to be over their 5 minutes. And they also asked me if it would be all right if they stood in the center of the area because they have some visuals that they would like you to see, and they cannot do that well from the seated position. And I said that would be all right. And so Susan Parenti and Joyce Mast.
So, my fellow county board members, as we deliberate on ways and means to afford the new construction on our satellite jail, We now need to,
What about the old jail?
we now need to investigate new funding streams.
I said, what about the old jail? Let's talk about repairing the old jail instead of building.
New funding streams to afford new construction on our satellite jail. New, 32 million new dollars.
What about affording the maintenance of the old jail?
New, $32 million new.
What about the old jail?
It's off the table. Anyway, as I was saying, we need to investigate new funding streams.
Wait a minute. Who took it off the table?
As I was saying,
Here it is. Here's the old jail. It's on the table.
it's off the table. As I was saying,
It's on the table.
it's off. The old jail, it's over. It's history. We may find other uses for it, but as a jail, we're done. It's off the table.
Why are you taking it off the table? It's still on the table.
Because we all know the old jail is falling apart, so that's why it's off the table.
It's falling apart because you don't maintain it. It's on the table.
We don't maintain it because it's falling apart. It's off the table.
It's falling apart because you don't maintain it.
It's
It's on the table.
It's off the table.
You don't maintain it, so that it's falling apart. It's on.
We're taking it off the table because we're taking it off the table. Do I make myself clear? Oh my goodness. I ripped my coat.
Oh,
Look,
me see.
the whole seam is ripped. Oh, look at that.
Let me see. That should be easy to repair. You know, just sew up the seam.
Yeah.
Needle and thread, 15 minutes. That's all it takes. It's easy to repair.
But I don't want to repair it.
What?
I said I don't want to repair it.
What are you doing?
I'm making it fall apart.
You're ruining the coat.
I'm not maintaining the facility. Uh-huh.
Are you crazy?
It's falling apart. Uh-huh.
What's the matter with you?
So now that it's falling apart, now we can build new construction on the satellite jail. Where's my coat?
It's back. It's on the table.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kilgore, you're next. That may be a hard act to follow.
Yes, I don't have any song and dance routine to do, I'm sorry. But you probably wouldn't want that anyway. So for the last, I'm James Kilgore, 602 East Harding, Urbana. For the last several days, I've been mulling over the consultant's report and trying to recover from the sticker shock of 32 million, which I think some of you probably suffered from as well. But I don't want to talk about that 32 million. In fact, what I'm going to say probably echoes some of what Deputy Sheriff Jones was saying. But I wanted to target three figures that came out of that report for me, which I think lead us somewhere. The first figure is 11.1. 11.1 is the average number of previous arrests for the people admitted into our county jail in the snapshot of 2014. Now, what does this tell us? This tells us that whatever we're doing is not working. Whatever's happening in the jail and the criminal justice system, whatever problem it's trying to solve, it's not solving that problem. We've got a revolving door going, and what we need is the kinds of resources that keep people out of jail, the kinds of the community resource centers, the substance abuse programs, the detox centers and public housing that keep people out of jail, and we need to think about ways to bring that 11.1 down rather than focusing on counting jail beds and debating over what constitutes a full jail. The second number that's important out of that for me is 34%. 34% is the percent of the people in the jail population who are minimum security. Now let's look at the size of this figure. If we take the 2013 average jail population, it was 221 average daily population. If we take 34% of that, we get around 75. If we take those 75 people who are mainly people with traffic violations, ordinance violations, these are not dangerous criminals. They do not need to be inside of a maximum security jail cell like what's being proposed. There are alternatives. Many counties and states across the country, even the federal system, uses dormitories, other kinds of facilities for to house minimum security people. If you recall, in 2011, when the National Institute of Corrections came here and did a study, they said, as a temporary measure, close the downtown jail, put the people who are minimum security into a temporary dorm next to the satellite jail. And what did they suggest that should be constructed from? An underutilized construction site trailer. They were not worried, and this is people who work for the Bureau of Justice. They were not worried about lines of sight, high-tech security systems and so forth, because they know that the people who are in minimum security facilities are not dangerous criminals. They're people who are trying to get in and out of jail as quickly as possible, and there is no point in spending huge amounts of money on cell construction for them. So I think if we think about those kinds of low-cost alternatives and also think of those as temporary quarters while we reduce the jail population, while we reduce that 11.1 through the kinds of programs that Deputy Sheriff Jones and other people who have come before this body are recommending, we'll find an interesting alternative to spending $32.1 million. The last number that I want to refer to is not actually in the report, but it comes from the ILPP, but it's between the lines of the report, and that number is 13. 13 is the average length of stay for people who are in our county jail, 13 days. So when we think about that, and I've spent 6.5 years in prison myself, so I'm not someone who thinks that people should be given the worst possible conditions and be punished while they're locked up. But a jail is not a prison. So in 13 days, you're not going to get a lot of successful mental health treatment. You're not going to get a lot of successful education programs. You're not going to do substance abuse treatment. So why do we need all these bells and whistles on our jail? I don't think we need a Chevrolet jail, as Mr. Quisenberry referred to. I'm suggesting we need a Ford Fiesta jail, and what we need is Lexus quality programs to keep people out of jail and in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kilgore. Our last participant for the evening is Nilafar Sambiati.
I think I haven't been here for a while, so I guess I'm out of practice. So you excuse me. There was a sheet of paper that I hope that is circulating here.
Yes, I passed it around for you.
Thank you so much. And I hope you don't throw it in the garbage can because I spent a lot of time on it to prepare it. So, and if you are wondering who that person is, that's me. When I found out that there is a new proposal in front of the county board for the construction of a new jail. And I had thought, probably naively, that we have done all we could and we are done with this thought of building a new jail. So that's me. I'm screaming. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. So I want to just remind us that in November, December of 2013, county board members decided not to build a new jail. And they seem to be wanting to follow Dr. Kalmanoff's recommendation, this big study that he did here. And as a result of that, that recommendation would focus on reentry programs, on pretrials programs, on having like a sobering center, so on and so forth. But now, it's February 2015, and we're back again at, where are we? Ground zero, or back to the square one. We don't have any plans. And I wish we did have a plan, which by that I mean that I wish that the board members had basically stayed course. And if it wasn't possible to say no to the sheriff's request, at least the board members needed to have asked the consultant, the planners, to come up with an estimate for a plan that only involves renovation as much as necessary and repairs that we all know we need to have at the Saturday jail. And I think this is, in a way, we all know that this is a critical moment. This is a historical moment. People from variety of points of view, whether they are conservative, whether they are liberals, whether they are lefty, whether they believe in social programs being supported by the government or not. Everybody, including experts, including many people in the criminal justice system, they have converged on the issue of no more jails. They all are saying that we don't need more jails. The system had failed us. And what we need is to focus our money and our attention to pretrial diversion program that I think is the best, and so on and so forth. I want to just very quickly read a quotation it's from a recent speech. So it's just like a few sentences. The person is saying that launch a bipartisan criminal justice reform commission with a goal to improve public safety and reduce prison population by 25% in 10 years. Provide additional investment in community-based reentry and diversion programs for persons re-entering the community. Increase correctional officer staffing to improve officer and inmate saving. Who do you think has made this speech? Our new governor, our Republican Governor Rauner. So that's why I'm saying that this is indeed a historical moment. And if we want to be in the forefront of treating the criminal justice system in a new way, then we have to follow this new consensus, basically. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the handout. Are there any board communications this evening? I have two for everybody and for the general public. I had previously mentioned that I was planning to, over the coming year, visit the 11 different districts. And I have got some of that set in motion, and I want to let you know the dates. On the 14th of February, Gary Maxwell and John Jay have very graciously invited me to visit with their constituents in Mahomet at the community center. And then on the 21st of February, Jim Brusk has invited me to visit with the constituents in Rantoul, including Jack Anderson and Diane Michaels, who are the representatives from that district. And then I'm working with the representatives from District 4, Jim McGuire and John Schrader, to set up a time to visit with the folks in their district. And then I will be moving on to the other districts. And then for my fellow county board members, I have a message from Kelly Murray, who is the executive director of the Illinois Association of County Board Members, asking me to take account after the meeting's over of those of you who plan to attend the annual legislative meeting, which is the 19th of February, the day after the governor's budget address, and that is being held in Bloomington at the Northfield Inn from 10 to 2. So just let me know after the meeting this evening. Moving on, Ms. Bergson, will you take over for Justice and Social Services, please?
Coffee smells so good. Okay. Do we have a motion to extend the reentry contract?
So moved.
Is there a second? Oh, aye. Thank you. Any discussion?
The motion was made by Mr. Shore, and Ms. Coward seconded the motion.
Yes?
Hi there. I don't know if it's part of what the deputy had mentioned before in terms of overall metrics, but one of the things I was looking for in this type of, granted this is trying to get a renewal, I don't think I'll vote no on the renewal. However, I would like to see the key performance indicators that we had discussed previously in terms of making sure that the money that is being put forth for this program is yielding the results that we had anticipated. A couple of points of clarification that I'd like to understand. I know on page 50 of our booklets today that we have some selected outcomes and measures, but I haven't yet seen anything that relates to that type of measurement in terms of impact. I know we're only 9 months in, but it would be helpful to at least get some gauge for impact, especially with renewing at $100,000. The second thing is to understand the reports a little bit better. There was some confusion in our caucus with respect to what does it mean to have 120 contacts. So for example, page 68, there are 120 contacts that are listed here. Is that for the year or is that for a given month? What does that number represent?
It represents people who have come to them for services in the jail or on parole or something.
And that's since the beginning of the program, or is that for a month, or how long?
That's since the beginning. I mean,
The program?
they didn't instantly start
Sure.
setting up meetings with people, obviously.
Sure. So just doing the math in terms of overall growth, I was flipping between the different pages. We added about 55, had about 55 contacts over about a 5 or 6 month period. I think it was August to early August to December or something like that. I want to get a sense for how many people are actually being brought into the program, what sort of outcomes we're actually seeing, even with 110 contacts within that 6 to 9 month period, and just more focus on making sure we're achieving the goals that we're really trying to get out of this program. Because I want this program to succeed. I just don't see right here, at least, and through the reports that we've received, that those are being achieved. And maybe that's what Chief Jones was talking about. And maybe I can make a motion to suspend the rules. We don't need as, okay. Just,
Celeste, can you come up and,
Yes, hello.
Celeste, for the record, would you introduce yourself, please?
I'm Celeste Blodgett, the reentry coordinator for Community Elements. And I did not know that there was an issue with any of the numbers until I walked in here tonight, so.
And Celeste, I apologize for jumping on it. I'm a big proponent for understanding where your money goes and what you're getting for it. And with the reports that we've received, some of the feedback we've provided, I don't think you were here for some of the feedback that we had provided previously, was a better understanding of what have we've gotten so far in terms of the, you can't see page 50, but for example, how much is reincarceration actually reduced? I know it's hard to do over a 6-month period, but just something that gives us guidance. Days to next arrest, or for health, self-rated health, mental health, utilization of psychiatric services. Is there any sort of measurements that we've put into place to track our progress as this program continues to make sure it's reaching its goals, or at least adjusting the goals as necessary as we get more and more data?
Okay, sure. At this time, we've only been seeing people since June 1st, and it's going to take more time than 8 months, 10 months to get the results that you're asking for. This was a planning and development year, so that is what we've been doing. So what we have been reporting are the people that we have contacted, the people that have been screened, and the people that are currently engaged in the reentry program. What specifically are the issues that you have with the numbers?
So first of all, I don't have a problem per se with the numbers that have been presented. It's not a problem perspective with what's in here now, it's what's lacking. And what's lacking is, if we don't know, for instance, how many have been reincarcerated since then, what are our current targets? What are we trying to achieve by the end of this year? 100% no incarceration rate? Are we trying to achieve a 100% or 50% usage of psychiatric services rate for those afflicted with mental illness? What are the goals that we want to achieve by the end of December? Because right now, they're not really laid out, at least right now, 1-year goals or even 3-year goals with this program. And I think we're to the point now, 9 months down the road, that we should at least have some idea as to what we're going to get in a 1-year or maybe even 2 or 3 year plan with respect to at least goals for what we're trying to achieve.
I don't really know how to answer your question at this time. Again, it's a planning and development year, so anything that we contract to do, we have done. We are collecting all that data, we are tracking it. As far as the people we've seen, but any of the reentry programs that you'll see throughout the country, look at the data for 3 years. So we don't have any specific data you're looking for after having seen people since June. Having spoken with our reentry case manager, I think about 2 of the people that she has seen have been reincarcerated. What that speaks to as far as a rate, I can't tell you at this time.
So can I conclude to say that at least at this point, there are no measures that you've identified with respect to goals by the end of this year? I think your target is to come up with those goals by the end of this year. Is that a fair assessment? Or at some point in the future?
Well, yes, absolutely. In the future, anything that was in the contract is what it is we are working towards. As far as anything with psychiatric or substance abuse measures, that, as far as I understood, was not even part of the contract. This contract was about people that did not have mental health or substance abuse issues.
I'm taking up considerable time. I'll yield any future questions unless no one else has any.
Jack Anderson and Jim.
Thank you. Celeste,
Yes.
I'm listening to you, and I understand what you're saying, but it baffles me. I come from a background of looking for return on investment in governmental programs where you report back, you have goals, you have a mission, you have goals, you set those matrices up, here's what we hope to accomplish. You're saying it'll take 3 years. So it's asking that we spend $300,000 potentially, before we see any results. So it's kind of like, well, we're going to make an investment on goals we don't know what they are. What can we expect, I guess, is my question of you. I know you're waiting for the data to come back. Right now, the sheriff should be able to tell you what his recidivism rate is, because he sees them come back and forth. And you can look at it in a broader perspective, whether they recidivate here locally or they're getting incarcerated in other communities that neighbor us. Well, I guess my question is, what are we investing in? I understand the concept. You don't have to sell me on that. I believe in this concept. I truly do. But how do we continue to put our money towards something we don't know what we're trying to accomplish, those goals, measurable goals, not just broad goals?
So the number of outcomes, in regard to how many people we've seen screened, how many people have gone through our services, how many people have been linked to housing or employment or transportation needs or benefits. That's what we can give you at this time. But as far as the recidivism rate and the effect that our program has had, we just
Right.
simply don't have that in this time frame. But I understand your concern.
Yeah. And it's not just somebody who's hooked up with, say, a home, or lodging accommodations for some period of time, but, well, maybe it is. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Chris?
No, Jim is next.
Him?
Well, I think the goals were set in the contract, but I believe we're kind of putting her on a spot here because I don't think the expectation was to create a report here tonight. The other part of it is we're expecting goals after, like she said, the people have been through the program and we've been developing, we want the answer to the metrics. I mean, the first 7 or 8 months, we're supposed to be putting the program together, setting the committee, getting, the caseworker, doing all those things, and then we work with the people, and then we have to, help them, and then see what the response is, see what the recidivism is. And that's what you're asking. And that obviously has to mean that, do they return? I mean, obviously, she said 2 people have returned that we know of, but to see if there's really some impact in our community, we have to wait a year to see how many people do actually return. And that's going to take more than 9 to 12 months because we have to see if our programs in this community, if our mental health programs, our substance abuse programs, if we can build and set up, housing is a big issue, jobs are big issues, if the community itself can respond to those and if they are working before we can see if there's a recidivism issue. So the program has to actually work for a year before we can see if that happens.
Right, I can certainly understand the eagerness in seeing the outcome of what you've invested in, but planning and development is essentially, it's planning and development, and it's going to take time to see what that will result in.
I think my question just came back to, or my statement, either way. I think we want to know what the goals are going to be and what you're aiming for and what we hope to achieve. And I guess maybe the future board, if not I, then if time were to go past far enough, we'll have to make a decision. Is a 5% improvement worth the investment?
Right.
Or maybe we're getting a 20% or 50%, that'd be great. But what is our goal? And I'm supportive of continuing the program. I'm just trying to figure out what are we trying to accomplish. I know what we're trying to accomplish at the end of the day, but how do we ensure the monies that we're paying is getting its bang for its buck?
Right.
What are the goals for this program? What does it hope to achieve? Thank you.
Chris?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, if I could, I think all along we've sort of universally agreed that the goal for this, whether we fully supported the program or not, is to reduce avoidable incarceration, right? I mean, the theory here is that it's been, I think everybody knows this, is keeping people in jail is expensive. And if there are some people who need to be in jail, but if there's a way that we can reduce the number of people who don't need to be in jail, who are in jail, then we're going to save the county money, we're going to reduce our facilities burden and so forth. I didn't expect that to happen in a year. I don't know if it's realistic for that to happen in 2 years. And I think I've said this before, but what I've seen as the most important short-term goal for this program, and I think this is something that if we haven't accomplished it already, we should certainly be able to accomplish it in the coming year, is to figure out where the most effective areas are in which we can do that. I mean, the charter for this program was deliberately vague. I have no idea whether the best way to attack the problem of incarceration is looking at people who are released from the jail pre-trial but have been in long enough that they've lost their job, whether it's people who have been sentenced after being convicted of a crime, serve a longer sentence, and then have trouble reintegrating in the community, or because they now have a conviction, have trouble finding a job, have trouble finding housing. I mean, we know that those are issues. I have no idea whether the most effective approach here is to focus on the frequent flyers, the people who are in and out of jail an average of 11.1 times, as Dr. Kilgore said, you know, or whether it's to focus on the people who are first-time offenders, who may be a, you know, more of a law-abiding citizen, but who slipped up, made one mistake. Maybe you're better off trying to get that person, you know, help so he doesn't offend again, as opposed to dealing with the person who's in all the time. Maybe you should be focusing on the frequent flyers, because they're the ones who are consuming the police resources and ending up in jail all the time. You know, we don't know the answers to any of those questions, but we want you to find out. And I think, to me, our primary concern in the first year of this program was whether or not we could generate additional revenue. There was a, you know, application for a grant for the DOC. Unfortunately, we're not successful in getting that, but, you know, there will be new grants. It is true, I don't know to what extent, I don't know where he's going to find the money, but it is true that Governor Rauner has come out publicly on several occasions in support of reentry type programs. So hopefully that means that there's going to be funding available from the state to help support programs like this. But for me, the most important thing is identifying where the most important goal should be identifying what your most important goal is, right? Who is it that you should be working with in order to achieve these results? Because, you know, I'm supportive of this program, I'm supportive of the concept, but yeah, I mean, down the road, we're gonna have to look at this and say, we're doing this as an exercise in reducing jail population. So in the long term, we need to see an increase in jail population. But I think in the short term, what would make me a lot more confident is seeing, and maybe this goes to what Mr. Killer was saying, seeing that as the time goes by, you are sort of refining your methodology in terms of who it is that you plan on working.
Absolutely, yes.
Any? Pardon? Oh. James?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to say that I'm going to support this. I'm in this program for the long haul, which at least at this point, I think means 3 years. I think it is not, I guess I'm looking at what occurred over the first year, and I think it is within the realm of what a planning and development year should accomplish. The second year, I'm going to be looking at the contacts and the network that is being generated by this program, how many people are being served, and I really don't believe it will be the third year until I start really clamoring for the outcomes. And I'll tell you along the way, the other thing I'm going to be looking for is how our money is multiplied. We had an opportunity at the beginning to maybe multiply this money, apply for grants, and get support from outside. But that's hard to do out the gate before you really have your ducks in a row. So I'm looking forward to and almost expecting that we are going to find other opportunities to increase the amount of money we're spending on this program without the county board having to invest any money. This is, in my view, $100,000 on a program like this is more seed money than it is how much needs to be invested to expect a productive program. So I'm going to support this tonight, and I am satisfied that it's going in the direction it needs to. But you know, along with Mr. Kibler, when we get to the second year and the third year, what would convince me of saying the same thing will be a little bit different.
Thank you.
Jeff?
Round two, sorry. To go along the lines of what Mr. Quisenberry and Mr. Alex said, I think what would really cover all bases, if, not in this report, I don't think it's necessary for passage on this, but some sort of, in the report, a document that says, by the end of this year, we want to understand our goals. We want to understand what success is. We want to be able to tangibly tell you how we're going to measure ourselves for performance and ultimately how we're going to improve ourselves. Because if you don't do that, then at the end of this year, we're in the same situation we're in right now, which is, what was your goal? And if Mr. Carter or Mr. Shore or I have differing ideas as to what your goals truly were at the start of the year, then we're going to have a lot different conversation at the end and be in violent disagreement about the success of this program. So if you can lay it out for us, what success looks like for you and for this program, it would help us tremendously in making sure that everyone's on the same page.
Okay, just to respond to that specifically, we have defined success as no new charge within 3 years of release from the program. So there is that, but again, the 3-year term.
And I would argue that that's not really a true, that's what I would consider a BHAG goal. It's a goal that it's pie in the sky, it's nice to have. We've already heard that it's not actually happened because we already have a couple people who've already gone back into jail. Talk about goals that you know are attainable, that you can measure yourself against, such as coming up with a plan to have goals by the end of Q2 or end of Q3, or talk about we want to at least strive for an 80% of case management services that are provided return a positive feedback on their survey, something like that, you can use to measure yourself and your performance, because the more you can measure yourself and improve, the better off you look and the program looks, and it looks like that we're doing the job that we need to be doing. So that's just my recommendation to you, besides just the very audacious goal that you have of 0 recidivism in 3 years.
It was 0. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Chris?
I just realized I should mention in my sort of enumerating the various options of populations we should work with, I left out DOC releasees. Obviously, that's a potentially important group too. I did, I guess, want to make sure that I made the point that I feel strongly that we need to make sure that the program is doing what it can to address individuals that aren't being served in other ways. I know one of the causes for concern I've heard articulated about this program is that to some extent it may be duplicating services that are available through the probation and court services. So I know that, for example, I think Champaign County has a quite good probation system, and we do what we can with limited resources to help releasees. DOC, on the other hand, parole, as we all know, is quite overtaxed in terms of the number of cases that a parole officer is supposed to handle. So, that may well be the most important group to serve, because they're basically being let out of prison and said, go forth and sin no more. So I just wanted to make sure that I did not leave out that group.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I'd like to try to address some of the comments from Mr. Alex. A lot of the discussion is about those issues, and are there the high flyers especially, and how to address them. So they are being addressed, and we'll continue to do that. Thank you.
I would like to include that our reentry case manager is in fact working with probation to complement the services that are being provided by them. We are in constant communication, and I do meet with probation, or parole rather, regularly. I'm in contact with IDOC releasees and scheduling them weekly to meet with Janae. So as far as you're concerned regarding parole and probation, I would like you to at least hear that we are trying to address that.
Anybody else? Okay. Thanks. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Aye. It passes. Do we have a motion to accept these reports?
Okay, thank you.
So moved.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Don't have any other business. The schedule of the justice reports to the county board is in the file, and the calendar of meetings for the Justice and Social Service Subcommittee, which are open. You're all more than welcome to come. And this does not go on the consent agenda, for sure. Okay.
Just one request to Ms. Busey. Would you remind everybody on the board, the speakers that you've arranged for the first two subcommittee meetings? I know you mentioned those at the subcommittee.
It's on page 83.
Are they listed there?
Of the subcommittee.
Yes, sorry.
The subcommittee will have presentations by Darlene Kleppel, Julia Reitz, and some law enforcement officers on the Youth Assessment Center at the February 26th meeting. At the March 26th meeting, there will be a presentation by Peter Tracy on both the Youth Assessment Center and the Mental Health Board's progress with reviewing and evaluating options for an adult assessment center.
Thank you very much, Ms. Busey. Mr. Alex, as Finance Chair, will you please handle the finance items on the agenda?
I will. Our first item on the agenda is the treasurer's report. Without objection, I would ask that that be received and placed on file.
So moved. Second.
We will just go ahead and place that on file. I don't think we need to vote on those. Is there any questions or discussion about the treasurer's report? Okay. I've asked that we move the item F5 up to this point on the agenda, so let's take that up now. I would like a motion to recommend to the full board we authorize a loan to the General Corporate Fund from the Public Safety Sales Tax Fund. Ms. Michaels and Ms. Bergson. The treasurer is here. If anyone has any questions for him, would be his responsibility to execute that loan. But I see no questions, so I think he's off the hook. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. I'll move on to the auditor's report. The auditor is not here. Oh, the auditor is here. Sorry, you were sitting behind the post. Do you have any comments for us?
You'll notice on the report that is available on the website, please remember last year was a 13-month year, so the first set of columns is going to have larger numbers throughout this entire year. So just remember, we had December last year, we don't have December in this year's report. So remember that when you're looking at it. But otherwise, I just ask that it be accepted and placed on file.
Any questions of the auditor? Ms. Petrie?
If this one is jumping the gun, please tell me. My question to the auditor is, I noticed there's a recommendation to extend the contract for one more year because of the 13-month cycle. Will then there be an RFP after we go through this next year for the audit?
Chris, do you want to jump into that now? Or
Go
do you
ahead and
wanna-
jump into that
Okay.
now. Yeah, I would say
Okay.
without objection, I'll place the auditor's reports on file, and we
Okay.
can move on to item number 2,
We-
which is the financial auditing services for the County of Champaign.
Sure. We are asking that you consider allowing Ms. Busey to negotiate a one-year extension of the audit services, simply because with us having just done the 13-month year, they've been with us through this whole process. Let's do 1 year with them under normal circumstances and negotiate or do an RFP next summer. I fully support the idea of doing an RFP, but I believe next summer would be the better time to do it. Next spring, sorry.
Ms. Schwartz?
Yeah, I get the point, and I'm going to support it, but I'm absolutely not in favor of retaining them long-term. I was not happy with their performance. So I do very much would like to
Certainly,
see
yeah.
whether it's RFP or a different, I don't care how you go, because you said you don't have to go for an RFP, so it doesn't really matter to me how, but I would like to see somebody else bidding on that.
Sure, absolutely. And I think it's a good idea, and I've spoken with some other county board members about, it's a good idea to switch up auditing firms from time to time, and I agree with that. I just would recommend for this year, we just continue for one more year, and then we assess it next spring, and I look forward, I hope, we only had 2 bidders the last time we did this. I hope we have more interested parties. I know I've spoken to some other firms just to tell them this will be coming down the pike someday. We'd love to have you take a look at us and see if you might be able to offer your services to the county of Champaign. I have seen advantages to working with a large firm, and I'd like to get some more of the large firms interested in Champaign County. There's a lot of resources they have out there. So, but our recommendation would be to let it go for one more year.
Thank you. Mr. Quisenberry?
I was wondering if Ms. Schwartz could elaborate on her dissatisfaction with the current auditor.
I probably prefer not to, but just as examples, the letter they gave us last time, when, I don't know if you remember, what they gave us in writing is everything is great. And then they showed up here and said, oh, by the way, there were those issues that we kind of didn't really say, things like that. They also had this recommendation about the cash balance that we had to go back and forth about. I mean, it doesn't matter. I don't want to get into details, but there were several things I wasn't happy with. And I understand the advantage of big firms, but I'm not necessarily sure that we have to go with one of the big firms.
Oh, I
because
agree.
there are some
It depends on
advantages.
the whole package. Absolutely.
I mean, we're a very low-risk audit.
Right.
Considering what risky audits could be, we're very low risk.
Right.
So if it's I'm not suggesting we don't need an audit. We obviously have to
Oh, yeah.
statutorily, and we need to either way. But a local firm can do possibly as well. So that possibly could open the field.
And Mr. Quisenberry, just to chime in along with what Ms. Schwartz said, there's been times when we've had to push back with the current outside auditors as well. Just like any business relationship, sometimes there are things that we see that we'd like to see done one way, they want to have it done another way, and we go back and forth until we come to a common ground.
Mr. Quisenberry?
Yeah, I asked the question because, it's a public record who our auditing firm is, and I don't think it's necessarily fair to say we didn't like them without having some concrete reasons as why, so that they can respond to that, or
Absolutely.
their customers can ask them about it, whatever.
Yeah. Overall, we recommend that we continue with them for another year.
Ms. Michaels?
Just kind of a housekeeping thing. I know that we have several items that we're still finishing up for next year, which
That's
we're
right.
going to be voting on tonight.
Mhm.
My understanding is probably through the end of this month, and then.
Friday is supposed to be the last day that departments and offices turn in FY 2014 vouchers to our office. There's always stragglers, but we've been really staying on top of people. So I hope to be able to have a more concrete look at how last year ended up by the end of this month.
Thank you, Mr. Farney. Anybody else? May I have a motion to accept Mr. Farney's recommendation of staying with the current auditor for another year? Ms. Michaels, may I have a second? Ms. Schwartz? Any last discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. We'll move on to the nursing home monthly report, which without objection, I will receive and place on file. Are there any comments for or questions to our nursing home representatives, who are now Ms. Court and Mr. Anderson?
No, not with regard to the report. Thank you.
Okay. Nobody on the nursing home? Okay, we'll move on to budget amendments and transfers. May I have a motion to forward budget transfer 14-21 to the full board with a recommendation for approval, $1,471 for the coroner to cover additional autopsies done in December 2014. Moved by Mr. Kibler, seconded by Mr. Rosales. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Budget Amendment 14-64, increased appropriations and increased revenue of $36 to cover marriage license surcharges received and paid to the Illinois State Treasurer. May I have a motion? Moved by Mr. Esri, seconded by Ms. Bergson. Any discussion? Thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Budget Amendment 14-69, $1,652 additional dollars appropriated from the fund balance to pay final fiscal year 2014 invoices and personnel expenses related to the payout of a departed employee for State's Attorney's Office. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Kibler, seconded by Ms. Bergson. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Budget Amendment 14-71, increased appropriations and increased revenue of $50,000 to clean up the court automation fund balance. May I have a motion? Moved by Ms. Michaels, seconded by, was that you, Mr. Esri? Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Budget Amendment 15, this is fiscal year 15 now, -11, $19,808 in new revenue from the fund balance to re-encumber 3 purchase orders for projects not completed in fiscal year 2014 at the satellite jail. May I have a motion? Moved by Ms. Bergson, seconded by Mr. Maxwell. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Budget Amendment 15-12, $1,318 in new appropriations from the fund balance to re-encumber equipment included in the 2014 budget, ordered in 2014, but not received until 2015 for public properties. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Kibler, seconded by Ms. Bergson. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Budget Amendment 15-13, $109,575 in new appropriations from the fund balance of the Capital Asset Replacement Fund. Move money from fiscal year 2014 budget to the fiscal year 2015 budget to cover purchase orders for goods that were not received before December 31st of 2014. May I have a motion? Moved by Mr. Esri, seconded by Mr. McGuire. Discussion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Budget Amendment 15-14, increased appropriations of $1,428 from the fund balance to carry over unspent funding for fiscal year 2014 planning and zoning contracts to be completed in 2015. May I have a motion? Moved by Mr. Esri, seconded by Ms. Bergson. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. We'll now move on to the main event, rates for animal impound and animal control contracts. We have a proposal in the agenda packet. I would ask that someone make a motion to move that to the full board with a recommendation for approval. Mr. Rosales and Mr. Maxwell. I suspect there will be considerable discussion and questions about this. We have Stephanie Juice, who's the Director of Animal Control here. If you want to come up to the table, I'm sure you'll be asked to answer questions. And I think we want to start with Mr. Quisenberry, and then Mr. Maxwell.
All right, there's been a number of conversations about the impact of this on smaller municipalities. I think it's important for everyone around this table to realize that the whole of the county has been bearing the cost of animal control, and it's only been since this report was done that we've really understood that to the fullest degree that it's been true. You can see in the rates that the larger municipalities have been paying the lion's share of this, and the county has been paying for the unincorporated portion, but that's not the whole story. The county has been paying for the parts of this that the smaller municipalities have not been paying. So as we look at this and we talk about the concern of raising these rates on these smaller municipalities, what I want people to recognize is that they've been getting a service of a higher quality than they've been paying for a number of years. And so I hear what has been said about this is a hard thing for a smaller community to swallow as far as an increase. And I understand that, but trying to spread this out over a large number of years, it's already been spread out over a large number of years, and the county and the other larger municipalities have been paying for it. That being said, I'd like to offer an amendment that the increased costs for communities who have not, whose rates are going up, be phased in over 2 years, so that they pay half of the increase in this first fiscal year, and they pay the other half of the increase get to the full increase in this second fiscal year. Because I do realize that it's hard for small communities to make changes, sharp turns in their budgets, but I think we need to get to a point where the cost of providing this service needs to be paid for, and it needs to be paid for by the broad population of the county. And the fairest way to do that, at least I believe, is by doing it based on how many people live in each area.
I'll second that.
Thank you. We have an amendment offered.
I'll second that amendment.
Mr. Weibel is seconding that amendment. I apologize, that came kind of early, so we didn't have a chance to hear everybody on the main motion. I'd like to actually hear Mr. Maxwell on the main motion first, if you'd allow me to go out of order here, because he asked to speak as soon as you did. Then we'll go take up your amendment.
I think we need to look at our chart, because I was going to propose, and I still will propose, and somehow or another I want to get there, that I move to amend the amendment to phase this in over 3 years. And I would further
I'll second that.
Okay, we're actually going to call this discussion on the amendment then, because you're speaking directly to Mr. Quisenberry's amendment.
Okay.
So I think Mr. Quisenberry's amendment has been moved and seconded by Mr. Weibel. And if you're offering a substitute, if you're offering to amend the amendment, then please do so.
Well, that's what I'm trying to do.
Okay, continue.
Okay, I'm moving to go with a 3-year phase-in and 3 equal annual installments. And that finally the animal control officer and the administrator be directed to provide the board with a breakdown of the calls per capita for each jurisdiction, along with any other pertinent information they feel helpful for the board's consideration on or before February 19th. Thank you.
So, Mr. Quisenberry, you want 2 years. Mr. Maxwell, you want to change his amendment to 3 years.
Correct.
Is there a second on Mr. Maxwell's amendment? Mr. Weibel. Okay, we're now 2 amendments deep in the stack. Any further discussion on the issue of phase-in in general? Mr. Weibel.
It's an amendment to the amendment?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not 2 amendments per se?
Well, it's
one's a subset of the other?
It's one amendment that has been amended, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Is there any discussion on the issue of phase-ins? We'll just go around. I think Mr. Kibler was a little bit first, then Ms. Bergson. Anybody else? Then Mr. Quisenberry again.
I'm in support of the 3-year side of this. I think that, granted, we've been burdening ourselves with this for years now, but I think the smaller outlying areas need a chance to adjust for this. I understand your argument, Mr. Quisenberry, that they've been getting a cheaper ride than what normally would have been provided. But that being said, I think we can work with our neighbors into coming up with a good solution. I think 3 years is better than 2, so I'll support the amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Kibler. Ms. Bergson?
He also suggested that we have a calls per capita, that they find that by February 19th or whatever. I think it may be that per capita is not correct, and I think we got to vote on that part of his amendment as well.
I think, if I understand, Mr. Maxwell's amendment included a request to come back to the board with an estimate of calls per capita by municipality. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I find little to object to about that. We're not changing the actual proposal. We're just asking that additional information be brought to the board. Is that fair? Okay. Just want to make sure I understand. Mr. Quisenberry, to Mr. Maxwell's amendment to your amendment.
Yeah, I'm probably going to vote against that, because I think to be fiscally responsible, we have to pay for the services that we're offering. And, I would offer that doing it over 2 years is a compromise to smooth it out. Doing it over 3 years is trying to kind of sweep it under the rug, in my mind, and we need to get there. I'm not sure. I think there needs to be a clarification on the calls per capita. I hear the subtext of charging people based on calls, and there may be some merit to the fact that some towns or some communities have more dogs or cats than others, and so they use the services more. But that changes. That fluctuates over time. You don't want your police service to be paid for by the number of times they come, or fire service to be paid for the number of times they come, unless you got false alarms, I guess. But I'm gonna vote no on 3, and hope that we can move to get this service, which is valuable and was in danger of being reduced in scope. The amount of hours it was going to operate because of the financial issues. You know, you got to remember that we were there in the summer, at least, thinking about reducing the number of hours because we couldn't see how to pay for it. So now you're putting it off 3 years to get it really paid for. And I'll remind you that we don't have a capital replacement fund for this department, and it depends on vehicles and a building. And I think you should suck it up and get it paid for.
Anybody else on Mr. Maxwell's amendment? I guess I would make the comment. I understand Mr. Quisenberry's point. I mean, we wanted to bring this in asking for, I felt like to be responsible, we needed to bring this in with a request for what it would actually take immediately to make sure that this program was being fully funded going forward. That being said, the vast majority of the funding, because it's where the vast majority of the population is, does come from the cities of Champaign, city of Urbana, unincorporated county, and those jurisdictions are essentially paying very close in the new plan to what they're paying now. So in terms of the dollar amount, on the one hand, I think it's kind of, I don't feel that the burden on these small towns is that significant in terms of raw dollars. Some of them are seeing substantial increases, but that's because they were being charged essentially a token fee before, and now they're being charged what it actually costs to provide the service. But the dollar impact of phasing this in over 3 years as opposed to 2, as opposed to 1, seems relatively small, so I'm actually inclined to support the 3 years. If there are no further comments, I would entertain a vote on Mr. Maxwell's amendment. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. We're now back to the motion as amended about the phase-in. Mr. Kibler.
So I would like to make an amendment to this motion, and more along the lines of, to the amended motion. It's the main motion now.
It's not the main motion. We're still on the phase-in amendment.
Okay, so we have not yet voted to actually make it 3 years at this point.
That is correct.
Okay, I'll wait till after that point. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the issue of phase-in over 3 years and of requesting that staff bring us an estimate of calls per capita so we can confirm whether or not per capita is a reasonable way to do this? Any discussion? Mr. Anderson.
What do you mean calls per capita?
Stephanie, do you want to weigh in on this? I mean, basically, she has data. I think actually let's let Deb take this.
I think what you want to see is a comparison of per capita versus the actual calls that are made by animal control. So I would propose that we can take each village and say per capita what percentage it is of the county's population. And then for each village, Stephanie has historical data about the number of calls for each village and services, and do the same breakdown. So you'll look at a percentage of this village is 3% of the county's population and 4% of the calls that are received by animal control. I think that, from my perspective, that's probably the easiest way for you to look at it.
I agree, and if we could just make sure we get a definition of what a call is. I imagine it encompasses many things.
Well, it's being called out because there's an issue. Stephanie can explain what the calls are.
The calls would be any kind of ordinance violation, or a citizen has a concern or complaint about an animal within that village limit. So we currently respond, just say to the village of St. Joe. Once we reach the village limits, their clock starts ticking, and it's $39.76 an hour with a 1 hour minimum. So if we spend 15 minutes there, they get charged the full $39.76. If we spend 2 hours there, then they're charged $79.29, I think it is. So We handle mostly ordinance violation complaints within villages. So dogs running at large, barking dogs, cats going to the bathroom in your flower garden, those types of calls.
Mr. Quisenberry?
Yeah, I guess after hearing Deb's description of what we're going to do with this, I have to ask the question, to what end? Because if we approve this and we move forward with this, is this to get this information before the full board meeting so we can change our mind about how we're going about this? Or is it to get the information to say, oh, we made a mistake, now we need to change it next month?
I guess either of those could be possible outcomes. Mr. Maxwell, did you care to speak to your reasoning?
Yes, we need, I think it's, one, it may well prove out that per capita is really the way to go. That there is a direct relationship between the population of that municipality and also the calls that are. So if so, then the formula is very correct. Thank you.
Mr. Quisenberry, did that answer your question?
Well, it kind of begs the question, if we want more information to figure out which is the right way to do it, why would we take action until we see that information?
Mr. Kibler?
So
And
to-
Ms. Bergson was next, I think. Mr. Kibler, then Ms. Bergson.
Thank you, sir. To Mr. Quisenberry's point, I think why this is important is that I think we do need to push this to full board for approval because there will be budget time coming up very shortly, and to have this ironed out sooner rather than later would be helpful as opposed to tabling it to next month. So pushing it to full board for approval is I think, important. Getting the necessary metrics is also important because I think the full board can then act and adjust the motion so that in case we do find that there is a better regression that can be applied or a formula that can be applied to give a more equitable cost basis as opposed to per population, such as number of calls is one thing, but I'd also be very interested in seeing actual number of animals that were part of that call. So for instance, if it turns out someone's a hoarder and now you have to pull in 50 animals, that takes a lot more time than just it's still one call, but it's now 50 animals that you have to take in. So take into account not only number of calls that go out to an area, but number of animals that are impacted and population, and just get those numbers so that the full board can be well informed when making its decision.
Ms. Bergson.
I thought they were paying a flat amount, but she says they, charge St. Joe according to how long they're there. So are these flat annual numbers that we have on that page, how are they related to her saying that she charges $40 an hour?
Whoever wants to take this.
I would submit to you that we're not charging enough. And so if we're going to go to a calls kind of perception or hours, we have to calculate everything in that we have not been charging for. And that is going to have an impact on what the charge is. So, if you want to,
Deb, if I could stop you, I think Ms. Bergson's question was, what's this number in the yellow column? Was that determined based on number of hours of service, or was that a flat fee that was
No,
negotiated
it's not a
with them?
flat fee, it's what they've been paying.
Thank you.
No, okay, thank you.
Was Mr. Harper, sorry.
Oh, fine, thank you. I know I've talked to some of the village trustee from St. Joe, because that's in my area. Talked to him this afternoon again, tried to get hold of the mayor, but their comment was it's too damn much money. But I understand we don't want this thing to be running in the hole costing the county money. I think the cost call and the number of animals, we can show that to these village people, say, hey, it really is costing this much money. I mean, I know Mr. Quisenberry said, hey, they're getting by on nothing here for years, but we need to show these mayors of these villages what it actually is costing the county to run this program. That's my theory in my conversations with the St. Joe people, so that's my concern.
Thank you, Mr. Harper. Stephanie?
I just want to make sure that it's clear that the number of animals doesn't necessarily correlate to the number of calls, because we do take in animals that people have found themselves. So if someone finds a cat in Pasodum, they can bring it to us. So there would be two separate the impoundment and the services are two separate fees and two separate contracts. So I just want to make sure that, we don't always go on a call and come back with an animal, and we don't always, we accept animals from the villages too. So those numbers are going to be different from one another.
Thank you for that. Any additional discussion on the amendment, which is 3 years and asking for more information estimates on calls per capita? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries unanimously. We're now back to the main motion, which is recommending this agreement as amended, meaning the 3-year phase-in, and asking for more information on calls per capita be sent to the full board with a recommendation for approval. Are there any additional comments on the main motion? Ms. Petrie.
It's mostly an information question for Ms. Busey. If this passes and the suggested rates are phased in over a 3-year period, I notice in the memo that there's going to be a CPI applied on an annual basis. Then it will just be applied, say, to the remaining 2/3 and then 1/3. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Petrie. Any additional questions or comments? Okay, I would like to make one. I appreciate the effort that went into putting this together. I mean, every year we bemoan the fact that animal control is operating on a shoestring budget, and we beat Stephanie up for trying to do her job. And I think this is an effort to do what the board's been asking for a long time, which is to try to charge all our customers of this service a fair share. We can argue over whether population is exactly the right way to do it, but I would argue it's certainly a more fair way than we've been doing it in the past. It's an effort to cover the costs, not only operating the service, but to build in reserve for capital replacement, which is something we keep hearing about. Where are we going to get the money to maintain these facilities, to replace the vehicles? I think this does that. It is indexed with the CPI going forward, so we're not going to be in the situation 10 years where we wonder, why are we still charging people what we were charging them in 2015? And I think, although certainly there's some sticker shock if you're paying, $200 and you're expected to pay $2,000, but I still think the dollar amount that we're asking for is pretty low for the quality of the service that they get and for the ability to not have to take care of this problem on their own. So would certainly encourage people to support this. Mr. J.
What would happen if one of these communities decide they don't want to be part of us?
Well, they don't get animal control services from the county anymore, so that means anything from they have to figure out how to deal with it on their own. They could contract with somebody in town or out to provide this service for them. They could set up their own facility to impound animals. I suppose in the most cynical case, you could say they pick up the animals downtown, drive them out into the county, and call Stephanie and say, we found an animal running around loose in the county. I mean, they're under no obligation to work with us on this. In fact, Rantoul and Urbana both handled their own animal control. They still contract with us for impound, but they have their own animal control officers. So I suppose one of the larger, one of the medium-sized towns might choose to go that route if they felt like they could provide the services for less than we can. Deb?
I would just like to let you know that Stephanie and I did meet with the Village of Savoy, and they're going from $1,500 to $15,000, but their response was, it's great service. We don't want to have to create this service on our own in this village, so we'll pay it.
Mr. J.
Yeah, I understand that, but there might be somebody that don't think it's a great deal, good deal for them, and I'm thinking of a smaller community, by the way.
Yeah, they're under no, I mean, this is a voluntary service. If they wanted to take care of the problem on their own and could figure out a way to do it for less money, they'd be certainly able to do that. I'm sorry, Mr. Anderson.
Just so I'm clear, because you charge an hourly rate on a response, I'll just use an example of Gifford in my district. Last year, Gifford had a fee of $80, $79.52. So that would have been a call as opposed to the impound line over here. So they probably, they had 3 hours worth of service maybe. But yet we're going to increase them, suggesting, to $1,300, when historically they only get 3 hours worth of service. Well, you can do the math. What is that? About $400 an hour now we're going to charge them. you can see why some of my constituents think this is not quite the equitable solution. I think what we had was right. If we need to raise the rates, it might be good. But who pays $400 an hour? But you're paying for having it there, and there's a cost. It's like paying for a fire department. You hope you never use them, but you pay a lot in case. But this is not a fire department. This is animal control. So just to support Mr. Jay's comments about our constituents not being happy necessarily. And I don't say that Gifford is not. I doubt they were happy, but so I'm just trying to understand the equity here in this formula being put together. I don't mind being charged. You can charge me $60 an hour for a plumber fee. I understand that. Whatever it is, in this case, dogs. But to suddenly increase it, and I don't have any expectation of getting anything greater in service, I guess we're spreading the cost is what we're trying to do. All right, thank you.
Yeah, I think you'd argue that, I think your fire department analogy is kind of apt. I mean, this is essentially you're buying insurance, right? You're saying we know animal control is going to be there when we call them, and if we have a heavy year or a light year, we can build the same amount of money into the budget. And obviously during a light year, you feel like you're getting taken to the cleaners. During a heavy year, maybe you don't. I certainly appreciate your point. Stephanie? And we'll go Stephanie and then Mr. Rosales.
So I understand Mr. Anderson's comments, but Gifford is kind of a unique situation. Their police department handles most of their calls, and they only call us when they need some backup or they have something they can't handle. But if you look at Ivesdale, which has no police department or does not have that type of service there, you can see that we've responded more times, and so it's kind of Fisher, Ludlow, Gifford, they all have police departments in Mahomet, and they handle those calls initially and then contact us. So those calls, it seems like there's a huge jump, but we would be providing the service that their police department is now currently doing. So we would be able to, their citizens would not have to contact the police department. We would just respond initially. So I didn't want you to think that we're only responding to Gifford 2 times a year, and then that's all that we would respond in the next 10 years. The next following year, we would be able to let Gifford know that, if you pay this additional amount, we would be able to respond without your police department going out initially, if that makes sense.
Mr. Anderson, will you follow up, and then we'll go to Mr. Rosales?
It makes sense. My only fear for you or your department is you don't know how many stray dogs they had last year that you were called on. So to commit yourself to responding to all of those, could put you in an awkward position if that were to happen with other agents or other villages. Thank you.
Mr. Rosales.
I just wanted to be clear on the phasing in of these 3 years. So in an example of Gifford, where they would be increased to $1,500, would that mean the first year they pay $500, second year they pay $1,000, and the third year they pay $1,500? And then subsequently from there on, they will continue to pay $1,500?
Yeah, I would say they'd pay, they'd go from what they're paying now, assuming that the rates are going to go up. There are a couple where the rates actually go down, but assuming their rates go up, they'd get a third of the way there next year, a third of the way there the next year, and then they'd be at the full rate in the third year. Right, plus adjusted for the cost of inflation, would be a couple percent.
Okay, thank you.
That's my understanding anyway. Any additional discussion on this issue? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? That motion carries, and we'll see this again at the full board, and we'll have some more information on calls per capita. Thank you. Let's move on to the county administrator's report. County administrator has budget projection and budget change reports.
This is still on fiscal 2014, which we are still receiving revenue and have some expenditures in this month as well. But this is as of the end of January 31st. And unfortunately, the picture reverted back to the way it looked in June, July, August. Our revenues and fees were down substantially in January. We collected $200,000 less in January, so that was a 50% reduction compared to what we collected a year ago in January. And the penalties on taxes, we really don't know until after the tax sale at the very end of the year, and it had been projected to come in at less than what was budgeted, and that proved to be true. Another issue was we anticipated that the nursing homes transfer to cover the debt service would be, there would be 2 of those posted in fiscal 14, but, and I didn't learn this until just this past month, but their December payment in our 2014 budget, which was paid in December 2013, was actually posted to 2013. So that was a drop of $300,000 there that had not been previously anticipated. So we look like right now we'll come in at 97.5, 97.6% of the current budgeted revenue. I would point out that on the state shared revenues, which are the sales taxes and income taxes, that we are doing fairly well. We're coming in on those right at or right above what was budgeted for the year. So that's a fairly good indicator. Hopefully that will hold true with the 15 budget as well. On expenditures, the underspending is indicated in personnel lines, and that's pretty much confirmed because I think we've completed all of the personnel transactions as of the fiscal year ending December 31st. And altogether, it looks like we will end up spending 98.2% of the total budget, which will leave this fiscal 2014 budget at a $1.3 million deficit, which is somewhat in the ballpark of where we anticipated it would be. And it leaves, if that proves to be true, it leaves us with a 12.7% fund balance, which is at least within our fund balance goal for the general fund. And then the budget change report is on the last page and just adds the changes that were made since the last board meeting.
So not quite as well as we thought we were doing a month ago, but we're still in line with the 13-month fiscal year
Right.
hit, so we'll take it. Let's move on to, we'll accept those reports and place them on file, and let's get a motion to approve the 3rd additional renewal year for our consulting agreement with Gallagher Benefit Services. Moved by Mr. Quisenberry, seconded by Mr. Kibler. Deb, any comments on this? I guess we'll see if anybody has any questions.
Well, as you'll recall, we have them as a result of an RFP, and the RFP allowed for a 24 month initial contract with 3 one-year extensions, and this is the 3rd of those one-year extensions. So if you approve this, they will continue working with us, and they've been doing an exemplary job. I think we're very happy with the services that they've been providing. And a year from now, we would be bringing to you an RFP for health insurance broker services.
Ms. Michaels? We already did? And this would be the same rate as last year, right? Thanks, Deb. Any more discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. May I have a motion to forward the resolution for the abatement and reduction of taxes heretofore levied for the payment of bonds to the full board with the recommendation for approval? Mr. Esri. And may I have a second? I'm sorry, Ms. Michaels. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Items for, I have no other business, I have no chair's report. Items for consent would be B, yeah, basically everything except E1. So B2, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and F, 3, 4, and 5.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Alex. Mr. Quisenberry, Chair of Policy, Personnel, and Appointments.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good evening, everyone. To lead off with Policy, Personnel, and Appointments, we have some housekeeping for some assignments for our fellow county board members. The first would be the appointment of Sam Shore to the Environment and Land Use Committee. Is that your recommendation, Ms. Petrie?
Yes, I'm recommending Mr. Shore to fill that vacancy.
Seconded by Mr. Kibler. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Next, we have an appointment to the Workforce Development Board to replace Mr. Schrader. Ms.
Point of
Petrie?
order. I'd like to have Mr. Schrader put on the record that he is resigning from the committee, because right now we don't have a record of that. He was appointed. The chair does not have the power to appoint and unappoint. So Mr. Schrader has to state he is resigning from the committee so that you can proceed with that.
Mr. Schrader?
You don't have to give a reason, Mr. Schrader.
If I may clarify, when we had our reorganizational meetings, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think my name ever came up for appointment for Workforce Investment Board Committee. I think there was a miscommunication, I believe, but I think we may have to look back in the record on that, but when we went into caucuses and we lined up positions for committees and other boards, I don't believe my name was on that. Would that be correct, Mr. J? So I'm not really sure I was ever appointed, Mr. Weibel.
Well, I tried to check the minutes this afternoon, but the minutes were not available, unfortunately. And it's not clear from the recording. So I'm only going on the basis of what's on the agenda.
There, all right. Well, to move this along, I guess what I need to say is I'm resigning from this particular board.
In the case that you were actually
If you
appointed,
were appointed.
we would accept your resignation.
I resign from this if I was.
Mr. Alex? Okay. Ms. Petrie, do you accept his presumed resignation?
I do very much accept it, and with an apology to Mr. Schrader, because then I'm the one who caused this confusion, and I appreciate Mr. Anderson being willing to step forward and take on this role.
Seconded by Mr. Kibler. Any discussion? Mr. J?
I think maybe I'd like a clarification, because I just assumed that Mr. Schrader wasn't on. I assumed that that wasn't a lifelong appointment, that when we were doing our year-end, our new year, I should say, appointments, that it was wide open to anybody that may have wanted it, and the chair would have had the right to appoint it anybody she wanted at that particular time. I didn't know that our appointments go on and on and on.
Ms. Petrie, you have a response?
I am the guilty party here. I did appoint Mr. Schrader, and my thinking behind that was that he was on the Economic Development Board and the Workforce Development Board. They have a nice tie-in, and I like that thread between the two and lines of communication. So again, it is my error.
Shame on you.
I apologize before all 21 of you.
All right. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay. That also passed unanimously. And finally, for the Regional Planning Commission, Ms. Petrie.
Yes, I am appointing Pius Weibel to that role.
Seconded by Mr. Kibler. Any discussion or questions? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay. That also passes unanimously. Do these need to go to the full board? So this is done. You guys can start doing your work. Moving on, under the other kind of appointments that we do, the first one under Section D is for the Beaver Lake Drainage District Commissioner, an unexpired term ending August 31st of 2017. Madam Chairman.
I'm recommending Steve Hamill.
Seconded by Mr. Schrader, because Mr. Kibler's had too many already. Any discussion? Seeing none, other than the sidebar conversations, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed, say nay. Passes unanimously. Next, for the Champaign County Lincoln Legacy Committee, one term for duration of March 1st of 2015 through February 28th of 2018. Madam Chairman.
I'm recommending reappointment of Raymond Cunningham to this position.
Seconded by Mr. Kibler. Discussion or questions? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed, say nay. That passes unanimously. And finally, for appointments, we have the Rural Transportation Advisory Group, one unexpired term ending November 30th of 2016. Madam Chairman.
Recommending the appointment of Regina Kreider to this position.
Seconded by Mr. Kibler. Discussion, questions? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed, say nay.
May I have a moment for comment?
Okay, Ms. Petrie.
I continue to encourage my fellow board members to, especially when we have appointments to rural committees, to help in getting more and more applicants for those different roles for each of these. I really appreciate these people stepping forward, but there was only one applicant for each role. Thank you.
And by the way, that vote passed unanimously too. You kind of interrupted the declaration of the vote there. Moving on, we have the county clerk's January 2015 report. I will accept that and place it on file unless there's an objection. Any questions about the report? Next, we also have the Administrative Services January 2015 report. Again, to be accepted and placed on file unless there's... Fire? Yeah, I'd light this one on fire.
You're whipping through now.
Are there any questions for Deb? Seeing none, do we have any other business? Diane, did you have other business? Oh, okay.
Which one?
All right, seeing no other business, we'll move on to the chair's report. You have received via mail at least one proposed change to county board rules from Ms. Berkson. And Mr. Weibel has also submitted a proposed change to county board rules. We can discuss these, but I'm going to ask that we make a more organized change to the rules in March, and make sure anybody who had other tweaks that they wanted to see instituted at this time to get those to me as soon as you can, so we can get them out for discussion for March's COW. So what I'd like to do is first, Ms. Berkson, if you would, give us the background for your change and why you are suggesting it.
The rule was changed last May to say that the party of the person vacating a seat, that the county chairman and the central committee could choose a candidate, and the county board chair had to nominate that person. The state law says exactly what our old one said. The county chair chooses the person, and that's it. And I just think we should go back to our old law, which is exactly the same as the state law, and it's legal. Yeah.
Mr. Kibler.
So I was the one who recommended the change. So I'll kind of give my background, and I think with discussions that I've had, I think with Mr. Quisenberry, Mr. Alex, they gave a very good counterpoint to this. But the goal is to make sure, the intent of the rule was to allow the party chairman and the elected precinct committeemen to choose amongst their peers the person that they saw fit, and that the assumption was always made that the county board chair was then going to nominate that person. We were just tidying that up and making it more seamless, more streamlined, that everyone kind of understood what was happening. I completely understand your rule, and I guess the counterpoint to this that was made, and I think made very well, which is why I'll be going along with this change whenever it comes up, is that if the board chair were to not do that, I guess this body would have the ability just to completely vote it down. And so I would encourage that to happen if that ever were to be the case. But I completely understand we want to be within what the state says, but I wanted to provide some commentary as to why it was added in last year the way that it was.
All right, Mr. Alex.
Yeah, I actually like Mr. Kibler's rule better than Ms. Bergson's rule, but Ms. Bergson's rule is in fact in compliance with state law, whereas Mr. Kibler's is not, so I will be supporting the change.
Ms. Bergson.
Any lawyer tells you how important process is. And this vacancy was not handled in the old way. First, we read in the paper, it's all in the paper, we read that the people have to have their appointments, their applications in by January 2nd. And one person did, so he was declared by the person in charge. He was declared ineligible, and the application period was extended. He was basically declared ineligible because he was a student, and they wanted someone that they were sure, well, who could run it again in 2016, but also it was said that he would not be able to complete this term, and he called in from Colorado and said he could.
Ms. Bergson, are you speaking to our rules or the
I'm
Champaign
speaking to
Democratic
how
Party rules?
I'm speaking to how this rule was utilized, implemented in this vacancy. And it was all very strange, not like the old way and not like the new way. And I mean, it was quite egregious. And I think, if you want to put in the whole old way, that's one thing. But just giving it over to the county chairman and saying he can do whatever he wants, led to very strange things this time, which are all in the paper if you want to read them. I found it quite offensive, and not any reflection on Sam Shore, who quite innocently wrote on his Facebook page that he had applied on the 5th, after the person that had been put in charge of it said that everyone had applied by the 2nd. I mean, it was just all very strange. Yeah.
Mr. Shore?
Just to speak to the digression, the 5th, the date of the 5th that I was referencing was the date that the names were made public, not the date that I actually put in my application.
So, other comments? Okay, so everybody's had their say. I'm going to have my say. I think Mr. Kibler's suggestion to change this rule was totally reasonable, and I think the way that we changed the rule was totally reasonable. Our rules state that in any case where they diverge from state law trumps them. Because it's possible for state law to change after we've written our rules and for them to become not applicable. In this case, however, we're talking about not going against state law, but trying to interpret state law. State law says that the person appointed to a vacant position must be the same party as was previously the person who held it. And to my knowledge, the only entity in Champaign County that can tell me whether someone is a Republican or someone is a Democrat is the organized party. That is the recognized jurisdiction of who is a Republican and who is a Democrat. Now, we may say, I'm a Democrat and take a Democratic ballot. I'm a Republican and take a Republican ballot when we go to the primary. That's declaring our party there. But if you're asking for an appointment and you're asking the chairman to fill that space with someone who is a recognized member of a political party, you have to go to that organization to get confirmation that this person is a person that can be appointed to fill that position. So I think Mr. Kibler's attempt to clarify what that meant is not against state law. It's explaining how we're going to interpret that requirement of state law. In fact, I've asked Deb to check in with the state's attorney, Barb Mann, in fact, to see if that, if she agrees with that's within our power to do. So I know that I've been advised, I'm not sure if it was Pius or whether it was Josh Hardkey, advised me that the board has taken this up before with regard to appointments to make sure an appointment meets the party standard that's required with it, like with board of review. And I have not yet found the resolution that talks about the various ways that you can demonstrate that a person is appropriate for those kinds of appointments. Mr. Weibel, do you have more information on that?
I'll dig out that list, and it's actually an advisory.
Okay.
Because by really First Amendment rights, if I want to say I'm a Republican tomorrow, I can do that. But the day after, I maybe say I'm a Democrat. So what I think in the early 90s, the board came up with some suggested ways of how you could prove that you actually belong to the party, making contributions, attending meetings, things like that.
Okay. Well, when we find that and see how advisory it was and what form it was in, we might be able to leverage that instead. In any case, we'll expect some feedback from Barb with regard by our next cow at least, and that's what's behind it. And the other thing I'm going to say is it's not our job to figure out how to select someone by either political party. That's their rules. I would disagree with you, Ms. Bergson. I would say you were selected in a very similar manner when you were appointed to this board by the same protocol, by the precinct committee people in the precincts that you were going to represent, voting that you were the best person to do it. I would say the difference this time was that it was at least communicated what was going on, and a forum was offered for those appointed people to actually speak at, which I don't believe has happened in any of the previous, and this happens a lot, folks. This has happened like 8 times in the last 7 years that we've had people appointed. So I don't think it's our job to fix either the Republican Party or the Democratic Party and how they choose their representatives. So I don't, and I won't try to do that. So Ms. Petrie.
I hope, since there has been a request for an opinion from the state's attorney's office, that request include, because the statute reads that the replacement should be of the same party, but the statute does not give any indication how one determines the party.
That's exactly.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
And can we say how we're going to do that, since it doesn't say?
Exactly, yeah. Okay.
Okay, next on the list, Mr. Weibel, would you like to explain your proposed change?
Yes, I'll try to make this brief. First of all, I want to blame Mr. Kibler for this one also. This actually came about at the last county board meeting when Ms. Bergson had presented her item about the changes to the rules. It was under new business, and I've thought about this before, actually. I think the whole thing having old business, new business comes from the days before we had the Open Meetings Act. Old business would have been business that you talked about before we bring back, and new business was, of course, fresh new business. Well, with the Open Meetings Act, we really don't have that as often. And also, we also have rules that say everything has to go through committee. So effectively, we really don't have new business at all at the county board. But when we try to do that, it sort of puts in a position, we're starting to talk about an item that's not on the agenda. And if we want to try to follow why we have the Open Meetings Rule Act, we should try to avoid that. Because what could happen is we could have a discussion, then at the next meeting, when it's on the agenda, we do nothing but vote. Then somebody comes there to wondering, well, how come there's no discussion? Well, it all occurred at the last meeting when it was not on the agenda. So I think that, just to clarify things, make it more transparent, I'm suggesting this change here. Also, going back to the rule in our county board rules, we have a rule that says everything has to go through committee. Yet, we are, on a regular basis, bring things up that come in at the last minute that don't go through committee. So I think this would be a good place to put those items. That way you know they didn't go through committee. It's a new business. And so that's the bulk of my suggestion. I'll take questions about this. I can tell everybody's excited. Mr. Kibler.
I'm pondering your second part.
Which part is?
Which is the new business and throwing items that were not going through committee onto the new business side. So normally, if you were going to do that, I would assume you'd have to do, as you indicated, everything has to go through committee.
Supposed to, but it
Supposed to.
doesn't.
There are things that go through it. So I don't think our rules, and I want clarification, don't dictate that we have to do a suspension of the rules to allow those items on the agenda.
Actually,
You're
we're supposed to, we don't.
Okay, so your proposal is avoid suspension of the rules in that case and add something in our rules that say they go into new items?
Well, that's part of it I haven't really worked out yet.
Okay, which is why I was pondering
Well, that's it,
it.
because.
Remember, this is
The way,
discussion.
the way it's set up now is that we still would have to suspend the rules for new business.
Right,
Okay, but at least it's on the agenda.
yeah, so you're trying to be
Okay, we
compliant.
could change it so that if it's under new business, that we could change the rules so that it could go on the agenda. But we can modify this rule where it says that it's actually page 7, item 3 on the rules. We can modify that so we could go ahead and just, if it's under new business, we could just go ahead and do it. Because people would know it's new business. We can go that route too.
So one final clarification, what about items that currently don't have a house at all within any committee? Let's say, for instance, the nursing home. Would those be qualified as new business, or would you add those to nursing home-related committees?
Well, those always go through finance or policy. Those never fall out, I don't think, right, Deb? Yeah,
Even the quarterly reports and stuff like that?
that's just a report.
It's just a report?
I'm talking about action items.
Okay.
Okay, you ponder that for a second. Mr.
The other
Alex?
thing, so if I could, the Nursing Home Board of Directors will sometimes refer something to the county board for approval, but then it's coming from the Nursing Home Board of Directors, and that's how it's listed.
So would that be under the new business moniker?
No, I
then?
would say that you would
it's coming
treat
from
that like a committee.
coming from a committee, yeah.
Okay.
So, Mr. Alex and then Mr. McGuire.
Real quick, I just wanted to speak. I think that, I think this is probably reasonable. I haven't thought through all the implications yet, but I just wanted to speak to this question about the conflict between the statute that Mr. Weibel cites and the Attorney General's comment, which is actually in the online Open Meetings Act training about whether you can discuss items that aren't on the agenda. The language from the statute he cites is the General Assembly further declares to the public policy of the state that its citizens shall be given advance notice of and the right to attend all meetings at which any business of a public body is discussed or acted upon in any way. To me, that says meetings have to be noticed and meetings have to be open. And I think the language from the Attorney General's Q&A, if an item is not listed on the posted agenda, is the public body prohibited for taking action? Yes. Open Meetings Act permits discussion during regular meetings of items not specifically set forth on the agenda, but it does not permit taking of a vote. So I see that as not in conflict. I think the statute says you got to notice the meetings. Meetings have to be public and open. I think that what the Attorney General is saying on the Open Meetings Act is you can discuss things as long as the meeting's open, you can discuss anything. You just can only take action on things that are on the agenda. So that is my interpretation. I don't think we want to get in the business of barring the board from even discussing things that aren't on the agenda, because things are going to come up in the course of either the county's business or
This will not do that.
I understand that, but I just wanted to, I felt like you were saying that these two things were at odds, and I guess I don't feel like they're at odds.
All I'm just saying is that it's not very clear to me. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, fair enough.
Mr. McGuire?
I guess I understand it, and I think Mr. Alex has helped, but I don't want to make it a matter of course by making it new business that we discuss something and then are ready to start action on it. I think I would rather see us notice the public, make sure they understand that we're discussing an issue and preparing to move on it, and it's an agenda.
Ms. Petrie?
Oh, wouldn't the solution just to be, instead of new business, just continue calling things other business? I agree with Mr. Alec's interpretation, and I'd like to understand better from Mr. Weibel, what was the trigger mechanism for this? Because this was the way the agenda was when you were chair, and it was never brought up as an issue.
When I was chair, I didn't consider it to be that important. What it comes down to, I'm not chair. I got other things. I have plenty of time in my hands, folks. It's a matter of time. That's what it comes down to.
I'm glad this is on the record now.
Yes, I mean, I have plenty of time to think about things like this. No, actually, Mr. Kilber wanted to start the discussion on Ms. Bergstrom's item about changing the rules. That's where it started. And, I said, okay, well, that's what started right there.
Mr. McGuire?
I guess in response to that, I don't have as much time, and I want to see things move and be able to understand them more, so.
Okay, that was a good discussion. There's nothing left for policy. D1, 2, and 3 will be on consent at this point, and I will yield to the chair for the close.
All right, don't pack up yet. I know. Mr. Quisenberry is yielding the chair to me because he has something that he would like to bring up under other business.
Yeah, I want to talk about the public comment that occurred today. I don't have a problem with public comment in the form of performance art, but I think that varied substantially from our expectations, and I checked, it's not in our rules, but I would ask, Madam Chairman, that if you're going to speak with public commenters and agree to unusual methods, that you give this body a chance to understand what that is and the opportunity to weigh in on it. I know we've had people ask to come and during public comment, play videos and do other things like that. In those kinds of situations, I'm going to vote against suspending the rules to allow that to happen, because that's not the public coming to comment. That's the public coming and making us watch somebody else's comments. And I think we ended up with a very appropriate compromise to that, as having some things presented to us under the Justice Committee as content that the Justice Chair wanted us to see. So while I wouldn't say that our piece of performance art crossed the line, it walked on it. And to be sure that you don't cross the line and get interrupted and have a petition from the floor to stay in order, you should ask us first.
I take those comments to heart, and I think those are good suggestions. And as a matter of fact, such guidance we might integrate into our board rules so that there's clear guidance on that.
I would say that there can't be clear guidance for every occurrence, so get in the habit of asking us about it.
Any other business? I entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved. Second.
Mr. Kibler, who was the second? Mr. Quisenberry, everybody in favor? Obviously, you're all out of your seats. Good night, everyone.